If we were to give you a depth chart right now for the Miami Hurricanes football team in 2024, what would that look like?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I have been just itching to give out my too deep, way too early, too deep. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet and writer for allhurricanes.com. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My colleague at All Hurricanes and our recruiting guru, our recruiting overlord, people get mad when I don't call him the overlord, Byron Smith, is going to be joining us here. And every time Brian joins us, he's brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. Mr. Smith, how are you, sir? And are you, and I got to say, man, I have been all in, drinking the Kool-Aid, having a great time during spring football. How's the spring season treating you?
It's good. I'm just ready for all the spring games to kind of where I can watch on TV. You can't obviously go to all these spring practices around the country, but the spring games are now kind of on TV in a lot of different places, and you can find them on YouTube. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm curious. There's some battles, Miami and otherwise, with depth charts that are still playing out too.
Yeah, and I want people to note that I do believe Miami's going to be active again in the transfer portal in April. And some people will say, well, how can they be active when they're over the roster limit right now? There's going to be a lot of players who are going to leave during the portal. I would estimate probably around 15, like more than a dozen players will leave in the portal, opening up spots for Miami to maybe bring in 4, 5, 6 players in the transfer portal. So keep in mind, I cannot account for players that are not in the building yet, okay? But first one, Brian, relatively easy if I'm going through the too deep, although there still is a battle for the second stringer. But at quarterback, Cam Ward, who we're going to talk about more throughout this episode because he's gaining more national praise. Cam Ward is Miami's starting quarterback. And just based on what I've seen so far, I'm not convinced 100% who the backup is going to be, but I'm going to give a slight lean right now to Reese Poffenbarger as the number 2 quarterback. Do you think that the season's going to open that way, or do you think Ja'Carri Brown or maybe even Emory Williams, who I think will redshirt, could surpass Poff by then?
If he does, it would have to be by a long shot because I know they would like to redshirt Emory. I'm not a huge Carr guy for this offense. I know other people would love to see him play. I just don't think he does enough post-snap in terms of reading defenses, so I'll be surprised if it's not Poffenbarger.
Okay. And I do think one of those two, Poffenbarger or Ja'Carri, will be the backup because again, I know Emory Williams is having a good spring, but I think the plan is going to be to redshirt him this coming year, the way that they did with Ja'Carri Brown in his second year last year. Running back, Brian, my too deep are both guys who we haven't actually seen since last season because neither are partaking in spring football. But, Mark Fletcher for me, and I'm optimistic that he's going to be ready for the season opener against Florida. And if he is, Fletcher's your number 1 running back, okay? And I'm going with A.J. Allen at number 2 with the tip of the cap to Chris Johnson, who I know is playing hard, getting a lot of first-team reps in spring with those 2 guys not participating. So I think he's going to feature prominently in the rotation. And then, the guy who's the complete X factor at running back is going to be Elijah Lofton. Like, is he actually going to get carries there? Or is he just kind of working out at running back right now, the early enrollee tight end, because, they just need more bodies there. But he looks very natural at that position. But I'm going with Fletcher and Allen as my 1 and 2.
I like your 1 and 2. And as for Lofton, I think they're going to use him at fullback, 2 back sets. That's just my guess. He's obviously a very good receiver. He will be the Swiss Army knife for the Miami offense, and that's okay. You need guys like that. I think Arroyo will play a little bit of H-back, maybe even put him in the backfield for pass protection and stuff too. Running back depth charts always should have an asterisk by them with the spread offense because, everybody kind of moves around. And they could put somebody like Robbie Washington back there and run a wheel route with him. Was he a running back? Yeah, but he's still a receiver. So it's just flexibility. Miami has plenty of options. And if they get Fletcher back, that's your workhorse, though, because he has the size and the experience you're looking for. He would be really hard to replace if he couldn't play at any stretch next year.
Yeah, and then listen, guys who could be X factors to try and climb the depth chart. But like Brian said, there's going to be a rotation. But, we haven't seen Jordan Lyle yet. He's not enrolled. He's going to be coming this summer. And Chris Wheatley-Humphrey, I've seen some good things from the Hellcat. So, he's continuing to learn. He's only been around for 3 weeks as an early enrollee. Moving on to wide receiver, Bryant, heading into spring, I had my question marks as to who the third starter was going to be. So far, Isaiah Horton has answered that question in a very positive way because I've been really impressed with Zay in spring football, and he seems to be that clear Colby Young replacement this year. So I've got Xavier Restrepo, of course. I've got Jacoby George as the second starting wide receiver, and then I'm definitely pretty high on Isaiah Horton right now, so I'm going to say he's going to be the third starter. And to me, my backups, Ray Joseph, no doubt, is going to be, one of the first guys in through the rotation. Based on the way JoJo Trader has been playing in practice, good luck keeping him off the field. And then I've also seen some good things from Shamar Kirk in his second year at Miami from JUCO. So I'm going to go with the three of those as my next guys off the bench. And Brian, I will say that Carr is my X factor here because he's also been playing really well as an early enrollee.
It's good to have options, Alex. The difference between the 22 roster and the 24 roster, at a lot of spots, receiver included, is stark. The only question I have is, do they have a boundary receiver to back up Isaiah Horton? And boundary, I mean a big body, just naturally 6'3 plus, 200 plus pound guy, and they don't. So to your point earlier about the transfer portal, maybe that's, even if it's not a guy that's going to purely challenge, there's no replacing size at that spot. You need a big guy, especially for the red zone, blocking, etc. They need another one. Kirk is the guy. I don't know how they'll use him. They might move him around. Yeah. We haven't seen him that much in games, so I don't know how they're going to use that. That's a really good pick, and maybe he's able to play some of that boundary and just be elusive enough to beat bump coverage when they go aggressive against him, and maybe he's the guy. So there's some options, but the young guys are playing. Yeah. I'm not disputing that at all. I've seen those kids as they grew up through the ranks. There's no doubt Miami has plenty of elusiveness and speed on the young guys. It's going to be a dangerous group.
And then another one who's an X factor at that spot is Robbie Washington. He's also doing really well. So I'm not excluding him because I don't think highly of him. And he might also play some defensive back this year because Robbie has been cross-training and playing in multiple spots. At tight end, this is one, and we focused a lot on the tight ends on yesterday's episode. Because we see highlight reel catches from these guys in practice every day, and I'm bullish that the tight end room that only had 18 catches and 1 combined touchdowns last year, I think is going to be a breakout room this year. I've got Elijah Arroyo as my first stringer. I've got Riley Williams as my second stringer, and I've got Elija Lofton as my third stringer. But like you were talking about, he's the Swiss Army knife, the true freshman who can play a lot of different spots. So we're going to see him on the field. And then I guess the X factor in that room, Brian, is going to be Cam McCormick, who just, by the way, happy belated birthday. He turned 26 years old yesterday. He just doesn't offer as much in the passing game, certainly, as the other 3 names that I mentioned. So I don't know how McCormick is going to factor in, but he did start most of Miami's games last year.
I think you're going to see a variety of 2-back sets, a variety of 2 tight end sets. They're going to be a little more formationally balanced and difficult to prepare for. McCormick won't get as many snaps. Arroyo is a better athlete. He is. Yeah. And Lofton can be a guy that you can split out and do different things. So it'll be difficult to even call it a package because, when Elijah Lofton's in the game, is he a running back or is he a tight end? Yeah. What is he? You know what I mean?
He's a football player is all he is.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's okay. He played receiver some in high school too. He is a very unique guy. This gives Miami the versatility to keep the defenses from really knowing what they're going to do regardless of who they put on the field. That's all I really care. Do you create mismatches and make them think? When defenses think, they slow down and you run by them. So they're going to have some opportunities. And we've both seen Riley Williams make catches and Arroyo, et cetera, that are not normal for tight ends in spring ball. That's a big deal. When you get those tight ends involved, it helps the outside guys get more one-on-one coverage. Ask Texas A&M's DBs how that worked out last year. If you're not going to cover them outside with at least one guy getting doubled, it's hard. But what about Arroyo? What about Lofton, et cetera? Miami has plenty of options.
For my starting and 2 deep offensive line, I've got Jalen Rivers, Samson Okunlola. Well, I'll give positions for the starters. For the backups, it's, roulette, who, they cross-train everywhere. Yeah, so Jalen Rivers at left tackle, Samson Okunlola, I believe, is going to win the left guard job. Zach Carpenter, I believe, will solidify the starting center job. That's one, like, I don't know. I don't know who out there in the Cane space is, like, talking negatively about Carpenter, but I get a lot of questions like, hey, some of these other content creators don't think Carpenter is going to start at center. That's not the impression I get. I think Carpenter is going to be Miami. I'm not sure where this negativity is coming from. I think he's going to be Miami's starting center, Inez Cooper starting right guard, CeCe Mauinoa starting right tackle. Then my backups, regardless of Ryan Rodriguez is probably the backup center, but outside of that, Matthew McCoy, Louis Cristobal Jr., Tommy Kinsler, Logan Sogapalu, I think, are the next 5 off the bench. And I'll tell you where things get spicy. Things get spicy on the defensive line and in the defensive backfield, and we're going to get to it. We're going to get to all of it right here. Alex Donno and the recruiting overlord Byron Smith with you. You want to keep it locked on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. And I know you are keeping it locked, my friends, to Fire TV. This app has been a lifesaver, and that Fire TV stick has been a lifesaver because I've got to get my live sports. I've got to get my on-demand sports, and Fire TV is your destination for sports. Live games, highlights, in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick you can plug into your existing TV, which provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball, college basketball tournament, or anything else, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. They recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. And that includes all of us here at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels lets you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on the latest in the world of sports, March Madness, NBA, so much more, not to mention news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. And if you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Thank you so much for making this recruiting overlord episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Before we talk recruiting, though, we're talking depth chart. By the way, I am going to post my projected 2 deep at allhurricanes.com today. So if you want a visual reference of everything we're talking about, check it out at allhurricanes.com. So, Brian, where this exercise got more difficult for me was on the defensive line, okay? So I've got my starters, and a lot could change here. Elijah Alston has been super impressive transferring in from Marshall. I think he's going to be a starter on the edge. I've got CJ Clark and Akeem Mesidor inside. People forget that Akeem Mesidor can play inside. I think he's one of your best 4. And then I've got, of course, Ruben Bain starting at the other edge. And then my next 4/5 off the bench, because I have trouble deciding, Jaden Wayne, Thomas Gore, or Marley Cook. I'm having trouble deciding there. Jared Harrison Hunt, who may even be a starter. We'll see how it plays out. And then Nigel Kelly, who's been injured in spring football. So defensive line, Brian, is where it gets spicy. And then another guy who's an X factor for me, someone who could kind of blow this up, is Malik Bryant, because he was recruited as a linebacker. He's been working as an edge rusher. He's been looking pretty good in practice. So Malik could factor in on this as well.
Malik played defensive end for Jones High School, so I always wondered if he would end up there, so that's not surprising.
Yeah.
Your point about defensive tackle in general is a conundrum. I actually was working on that earlier this morning when I was writing an article for All Hurricanes, and I honestly don't know how it will work. I'm guessing just the healthiest guys will play or the guy that had the best week of practice. I think it'll change a little bit throughout the season. And depending on who they're playing, Mesidor might play some strong side end and 3 tech. He's a swing guy.
Right. Yep.
So where you label him kind of depends, but Ruben's probably a strong side end at this point. He's just under 280. He's fine there, but you need Mesidor on the, like, your 2 best players probably are both 5 techniques.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it is what it is.
And Messidor did say yesterday that he and Ruben can absolutely play together because that was one of the questions he got.
And it's a very important question. Are you comfortable on the left side, the right side? All that stuff matters because the technique changes on which side you're on. But going inside, those are different kinds of human beings you're going against. I had a guy the other day tell me that, when you're a D tackle, the guys in front of you, the two guys, if you get double teamed, that's on average 630 pounds in front of you. Just thinking about that, that's a different mentality. Because on the edge, there's more space to play with. So I'm curious to see how Messidor would handle that if they really put him inside a lot, because that's a different kind of pounding. So and he's really good at getting off the ball and getting up the field, but you got to be able to hold the point of attack and let the linebackers do work too. That's why you got guys like Hunt. That's why they went out and got Cook. That's why they went out and got Clark. I think Clark is a plugger. He played in a 3-man line and could hold the point for NC State. He might be the most undervalued of all these guys because you got to have a nose guard that can command a double team. Really important pickup.
Yeah, well said. So looking at my linebackers, I'm very sold on the two starters, Kiko Mauinoa and Wes Besaint. Mauinoa has been almost completely limited in the spring, but he has been getting in some individual work. And obviously he's probably the best, maybe one of the two best players on the defense, along with Ruben Bain. Yep. And for my backups, I think Popo Aguirre, and I'm going to say, Brian, based on the spring he's having, Bobby Pruitt, the early enrollee, I think he can work his way into that 2 deep.
I think that Pruitt might even start at some point, depending on the team you're playing, because he can be the third linebacker. But in today's game, most of the time you're a nickel anyway. So I think they'll rotate him in more run situations because it's easier to play downhill than put him into coverage. So they'll blitz him or he'll be in a run gap. Like, this is your one responsibility. When it gets complex, teams that use a ton of motion and change personnel a lot, you'll see less of the freshmen because they're going to get burned. That's why they use motion. At the NFL level, you see shift. They're even trying to do it at that level, and sometimes you get wide open guys. So Pruitt's an athlete, but he's give or take 200 pounds. My other concern is how much of the pounding can he take throughout a 12-game regular season? Like their bye week in the middle of the year, and then they have Louisville on the road, and then they have Florida State at home, like right after. Those kind of back-to-back games against physical teams, how do you handle it? That's why you got to have depth. By then you're going to have somebody's going to be banged up. He might have to play. So I hope he can get up to 205, 210 and be ready for that. But, man, he can run. So he fits the modern-day linebacker, and they can probably rotate him in a couple spots.
I think Miami has options at the nickel or star position.
Yes.
I could see Damari Brown starting there or Meesh Powell, but I think I prefer Powell playing safety. So we'll see how that one plays out. Dylan Day, though, another early enrollee freshman, could definitely be a backup and could end up at the 2 deep there. For my safeties, ideal situation, obviously, this guy is one of my possible names at nickel, but Meesh Powell and Savion Riley as the starting safeties. I like that the best. Jaden Harris and Zaquan Patterson as backups, Brian. I mean, do you think Zaquan is a guy who could be ready to be a bat? I mean, some people even think he could compete to start. How ready do you think Zaquan's going to be this year?
Physically, I have no question. Safety is a spot, and I talked to some people about this recently that know him, etc. Really intelligent kid, but again, like Louisville is not a fun team for young players to go against. Motion. Tremendous number of packages. It's too much mentally for young guys most of the time. They'll get somebody out of position. If you're going to play him against everybody, you got to limit his role in certain games. They know that. But at the same time, if you play him towards the box a little more, where he's not at the back hauling the defense because free safety does that, he could start. I mean, physically, I know he can. Like he's built a little different than most kids his age. He was that way when he was a junior in high school. So I think he can play a lot. I just prefer that they didn't have to. And hopefully like Powell and some of those other guys can help him along and learn the defensive scheme because it's totally different than the high school level. The complexities on a whole nother playing field. If he can do that, though, that helps solidify a back end that lost 2 guys early to the draft. And that's hard. So I'm curious as well. If he does that, they should be okay at safety, though.
Yeah, cornerback, I think, could be impacted by the upcoming transfer portal. But based on what I'm seeing now, Daryl Porter and Jadis Richard are my starters. And then I'm going to say Damari Brown and Robert Stafford would be the next guys up there. And Stafford is one we haven't seen a whole lot of him at Miami. I watch him in practice a little bit. He's been popping recently. You know, you covered him in high school in the Space Coast. What can Miami fans expect when we start to see Stafford on the field more consistently?
Think of 1990s Miami, a little smaller corner, but can just really, really run. Very twitchy. He could have played running back or receiver. He's not quite as fast as like Chris Johnson Jr., but he's in that mold where he's just so athletic. He can do things you can't teach. And he's also a kid that likes football. I mean, he doesn't care if he's punt return, receiver, whatever. He always did everything for his program. And he played at O'Galley. It's a program in the Melbourne area. I don't think they're going to keep him off the field. I just don't know exactly how they're going to use him. They could use him some at nickel against a team that uses a true slot receiver. He's just not the biggest guy, so I don't know if they can play in there all the time because against tight ends and stuff, he'd be in trouble. But he's got the athleticism to play early. And again, you got guys that are pushing the pile, kind of like Elijah Lofton, different position. It's just good for the roster. This is what Miami had when they were really good. Young players coming in expecting to get PT. This is another kid that's kind of paid his dues through year one. Now it's year two. It's time to turn it up and produce. He'll get on the field. So will Damari.
And I think Stafford could end up returning some kicks as well. He was one of several players I saw returning kickoffs and special teams drills yesterday. So I wonder if that's going to be another way Miami fans may be able to see him flash a little bit. We have so much more to come on this episode of Locked On Canes. We will get into some recruiting with the recruiting overlord, plus another piece of national praise for Cam Ward. And let me set the table for this one, Brian. People call me a sunshine pumper and how, you Donno, you hype up everybody so much during spring ball. I try to call it like I see it. They call me a sunshine pumper. When I was watching this clip of a national analyst talking about Cam Ward, even I thought, wow, this is a little over the top. But hey, maybe Ward's going to live up to this expectation. My friends, you want to keep it locked right here. We have the recruiting overlord with us on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. And I know you're keeping it locked to FanDuel. And how can you not? The sports calendar is loaded, and FanDuel's making it even more exciting to get in on the action. Because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet the tournament, Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, and so much more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Hey, do you watch ESPN and Fox Sports all day on your TV? Do you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we have Brian Smith with us. So Brian, one of the, and I got to say, I've been very pleased that, some of the national college football hosts like Josh Pate at 24/7 and JD PicKell, who we're about to play a clip from, have been overwhelmingly positive on the roster Mario Cristobal is building, from recruiting to the transfer portal. They're very high on Cam Ward. So this clip came across my desk yesterday, the old Donno news desk, of JD PicKell, who does a good job at On3. Here's JD talking about Cam Ward so far at Miami spring practices.
Check out Cam Ward. Just dealing the pill like a shady pharmacist here at spring practice. Now, I understand this is ISO footage of him. Oh, nice little throw in the middle of the net there. I love this one right here. Uncorks it deep. Ball has more RPMs than Steve Wiltfong dropped yesterday. This is a reason to be excited. Also, look at the swag on him, too. We got the towel. We got the shooting sleeve. We got the visor. Got the little hop as we throw the football away in quick game. I understand. It's early, and this is a nice one here right now. Drops it in the bucket. I don't know how far that is. Might be 30 yards, might be 40 yards, could be 50 yards. But just the overall swag from the dude. He's out there playing darts in real time at spring practice right now if you're Miami. People are going to say, calm down. Say, no, you calm down. This dude is playing darts at spring practice. As an offense, Miami, 3.5% of the passes they threw last year. 3.5% ended in interceptions. And we got this dude putting on an aerial assault.
So he's out there. He's dealing the pill like a shady pharmacist was one of the best lines out there. But it's like, and I got to say, Bryant, like Ward has overall looked really good. And then for those who are following Tyler Van Dyke at Wisconsin so far, where he's not getting all the first team reps and his coaches say he needs to come out of his shell a little bit. I'm very relieved that Cam Ward is Miami's quarterback right now. But when I watch that, even I say, hold on, let's pump the brakes for a second and let's actually get to the regular season before we go this crazy.
I think it's interesting that he brought it up randomly.
Yeah.
And I know you need different kinds of content if you're a guy like this. JD's, doing his job. But look, the video is still the video. And you and I have seen him live. Yeah. I remember watching him last year. Ironically, their first game, he was at Washington State. They played Wisconsin, and he murdered them. And the reason he did is his ability to be elusive, his ability to make clutch throws, the things that Miami missed last year. Tyler wasn't the most mobile guy anyway. This is a difference maker. Yeah. There's no reason not to praise him. He's proved it in the past. It's not like you're just going off practice only at the University of Miami. So I'm okay with it. I also think that he's a rare talent just based on all the arm angles and the velocity that he can get. And JD brought that up. There's no reason to think that he won't be great in producing. The last article I put up at All Hurricanes, the first thing I talked about, can they score 40 a game this year? One reason they could is Cam Ward. He's going to make throws that other guys can't. He's going to get the ball to Xavier Restrepo. He's going to get it to Colby George, Isaiah Horton, etc. a couple more times a game. And you give one of those playmakers an extra opportunity, they might score from 80 yards. That's the difference in winning and losing. Finding your players and putting them in space and giving them an opportunity to create. Miami's got plenty of those guys that can run. I always have. Now they've got somebody to get them the ball in more great opportunities down the field too. Miami's deep game was all over the map last year. I expect it to be consistent. They should be good.
And by the way, the video clip we played is courtesy of On3 Sports. Let's talk a little recruiting here, Brian. A prospect we have not talked about. So I'd love to talk about five-star defensive lineman Justus Terry. He is a USC commit, was previously a Georgia commit, and people are also now talking about other programs like Miami trying to flip him. In fact, Miami is going to get Justus Terry, five-star defensive lineman, down for an official visit come June. Stephen Wagner at Kane Sports said to think of him as this year's Justin Scott. Do you agree with that? And Justin Scott was a guy that Miami flipped last year from Ohio State.
A couple of points. I didn't get to meet Scott, so this might be a little biased, but like his film, his body type and all that, there was reason for everybody to recruit him. Can't teach 6'4", 310 and mobile. Can't do it. That being stated, he played against pretty mediocre, lower-level private school competition in Chicago. So I wasn't sure because he was just running over guys. I was more impressed with his basketball film. Yeah. I've seen Terry play at Under Armour twice. I've seen him at the Future 50, at IMG, etc., going against elite players and be really good. He's one of the top 10 kids in America, in my opinion. He was a guy, when I saw him as a sophomore, I'm like, you're a sophomore in high school? His arms are big as my legs. So, and he's a great kid. But this is a guy that's going to get recruited to the end. You can't teach his size and athleticism at that spot. Guys over 250 that are athletic get recruited harder than any other spot because there's only so many of them. Georgia and Alabama coveted him from the outset, if that tells you anything. I think he's a better overall prospect than Scott because he's so versatile. He can play end, 3-4 or 4-3, or play D tackle and be a pass rusher. Scott could do different things too. There are different kinds of players, but if I could only take one, I would take Terry. And I know him, great kid, going to play hard, loves football, and he's an easy guy to get along with. So he'll work into any locker room.
Miami has been so active recruiting running backs in this cycle where it's like I almost feel like they want to create this like game theory situation where they've already taken one who they like. They've taken a verbal commitment from Gerard Pringle, who is someone that running backs coach Matt Merritt loves, going back to his previous stop. So they love Pringle, but I can't imagine they take more than one other running back, Brian. So we've had, Byron Louis, who's already been crystal balled to Miami at some point during this process. He visited last week. Alvin Henderson visited last week. And there's another running back who is at Miami today visiting out of the state of Ohio is Kentrell Rinehart, 3-star running back, 6'1", 205 pounds. So I guess and I don't know if they're as serious about Rinehart as they are about the other names that I mentioned. But Brian, if Miami can only, let's say, take one more running back in this cycle, who do you think it's going to be out of the several that they're still recruiting?
Miami is battling the never-ending saga of here's our list of guys we want. The problem is the top guys aren't deciding before the guys blow up. There's no fixing that. Do I think they would take Rinehart over Lewis if they both wanted to commit? No.
Right.
He's good, but I think they would take Lewis.
Yeah.
But Lewis wants to take visits. Miami, there's no way to do it. You're guessing. Right. Miami or otherwise, you're guessing because you don't know what Lewis is going to do. Florida State's a definite threat. Alabama and all these other schools recruiting him. Who knows where he will go? But he's been to Miami about 100 times. But he doesn't want to just pull the trigger and end it. So you got to recruit other guys. Right. At some point, you got to pull the trigger and say yes or no on a player, though, because somebody's going to want to commit. Rinehart fits the role, too. They need another bigger back.
Yeah.
That would be the other thing. They need one of these two guys to be a bigger back. Pringle's a good player, but he's not over 200 pounds. Probably better shooting in, darting through guys, and got a little power, but he's about speed and elusiveness. Either one of Rinehart or Lewis would be a good compliment. It's just really hard to figure out how they're going to manage it because I'm sure they would rather take the local kid who's probably the better player anyway. But when would he decide?
Now, I notice you don't mention Henderson's name as much. Do you think just in your mind, and you cover recruiting nationally and you also cover Auburn very closely, do you think Henderson's going to end up maybe trending away from Miami?
I think he'll commit to Auburn any day.
Okay.
I think he's been to a gazillion of their practices. He's a fickle kid about announcing, and he likes the recruiting process, but I think he's going to Auburn.
Gotcha. Another player I wanted to ask you about, and I love it whenever I see Miami mentioned with these towering offensive linemen. And anytime I see somebody listed over 6'6", I get very excited. I'm a huge Markel Bell fan who's 6'8" on Miami's O-line. Offensive tackle Adam Guthrie. He's also out of Ohio, 6'7", 285 pounds. He's rated 4 stars by On3 and Rivals. 24/7, I guess, is late to the party. They haven't given him a ranking yet. But have you had a chance to watch Guthrie? And is this one of those guys that every program wants, these 6'7" offensive tackles?
These are the kinds of players you kind of watch through the camps. They're more fun. Linemen develop later. I want to see him live before I really give any kind of true evaluation. But he's being recruited on measurables right now because he fits the profile. And you're right. Miami loves the tall guys. Yeah. Markel might even be 6'9". I'm not sure, but he's up there. That's okay. You have to get in on them early, though. And if you noticed Miami's specific positions, well, they don't care if the kid's from Vermont. Right. They want good players. Excuse me. I think that this is a smart move. If you're going to get in on a kid that's going to be a national recruit, you better do it early. So Miami's going to have to take a tackle in every class. This is an opportunity because there are only so many guys that size that have that length, and this kid has it.
Do any I know you were joking, but do any national recruits come out of Vermont? Because and you've been doing this a lot longer than I have. I cannot recall ever talking about a player out of Vermont on this podcast.
I don't think that I can recall one. I'm sure BC has probably signed one because they're close to it. But that state is not exactly the most football savvy.
Like when you mentioned it, I'm thinking have we ever covered a player from it? If they can find if there's any 6'7" high school in Vermont, Mario will find him and Mirabal will make him play offensive tackle. If there's anybody out there. Well, we appreciate your time as always, guys. Again, we talked in the early part of this show about my way too early, too deep depth chart for Miami football. You can check that out today at allhurricanes.com. Brian Smith, thank you so much for the time. Follow him on X at FBScout_Florida. Follow our show at Locked On Canes. We will follow you back. If you're watching on YouTube, smash that like button, hit that thumbs up, subscribe to our channel. If you listen to the audio version, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. And we'll talk to you again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.